Good morning. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene. And today we're talking about
D&D 50th anniversary.
50th anniversary. Wow.
Yeah, it's a while, huh? D&D was born in 1974 or published in 1974. It says so on the little white box and on the books.
A little white box and the books.
Well, the first boxes weren't white, but yes. And born was role-playing games, even though people contest it was role-playing. There may not have been the first role-playing games, blah, blah, blah. But it has stayed the most popular one for a long time. It did lose a little bit when Pathfinder came out and 4th edition. But with 5th edition, D&D came roaring back, and is literally the most popular role-playing game in the world.
The world, he says.
And, it is just very popular, right? You go to the internet and there's people playing D&D 5th edition everywhere, right? Critical Role, there's the Glass Canyon podcast, and everybody, and there's all these groups who are getting a lot of people watching them play D&D. And is also culturally, it has become more acceptable, or I don't know. It's not seen as such a negative as it was when I was growing up in the late 70s and the 80s. As far as being a person who played D&D, it wasn't such a negative stigma, right? Now people are like, oh, that's what role playing is. Oh, you're not in a dank, what is it?
Basement,
with a bunch of goofballs doing weird things. It's just people talking.
now you're in your living room or dining room with those goofballs doing weird things.
Oh, the kitchen, and you're doing weird things, but it's not like really weird, right? You're just sitting around talking, creating stories together, and that's pretty neat.
So what's changed in this last 50 years?
A lot has changed, right? I would say the rules being the number one thing.
All role-playing games have editions, and D&D was the first one. Well,
original D&D.
Original D&D had. Did it go to 2nd edition and then AD&D?
No, it went to original D&D, and then I'm not going to go into all the editions and stuff, but there was original D&D in the little white boxes, and then it came out with the basic set, expert set. Right, like intermediary between that and AD&D. I never got the box set. My friend Sip and Esteban got the box set, the basic set, the blue box, and they played that on their own because they didn't have the rules that we did. Because my brother had photocopied. No, it wasn't photocopied. I guess photocopied back then. The little books, and then finally we got the little books. But by then we were moving on to AD&D because we got the player's handbook. I'm sorry, we got the Dungeon Master's Guide, I think, first, and then the Player's Handbook, and then the Monster Manual came out. And they were pretty expensive, and as kids, we couldn't really afford to buy them, and my friends couldn't buy them, so they got a box set that was, $12.99 or something, that had all the rules you needed to get it to 5th or 6th level or something, and that's what they played. So the editions, there's all kinds of editions, but for a game that's been 50 years, there's not that many editions.
There's only... Because we're only at 5th edition, right?
Yeah, but they don't include...
I understand. The
original and AD&D is 2 editions, and then there's the boxes sets. So that's 1, 2, 3, and then there's 2nd edition, so add 3. So there's 8 editions of D&D. So the rules, right? So the rules came from a war game, which was chainmail, and then they added role-playing elements to that. They collated ideas... Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. They were playing relatively close to each other, supposedly, and there's all kinds of information about those two guys making D&D. They made D&D. Dave Arneson and Gygax are on the original 3 little books, and then in the box, the white box set, and by the time AD&D, Gygax was the one on the credits for AD&D. But there was and Dave Arneson too, kind of thing. And then Dave Arneson was kind of bought out and stuff. And there's all kinds of stuff about that. But as far as the rules, it came from a war game roots.
Yes.
So some of the rules were kind of weird, kind of clanky.
But at the time, that's what people were
Yeah,
people were
I mean,
playing war
it was-
games. So
it was-
it wasn't as clanky as you might think.
Right. For them, it was just an offset of war game rules
Yeah.
to account for heroic characters in the game, and then slowly evolved away from this war game into this role playing game where the main theme is not this large war battle, let's say, going on where heroes can actually influence the battle. It basically just says, well, let's focus on the heroes and not even worry about this, make it a battle type of game.
Because those will just appear naturally.
So the rules were kind of, they were complex, and it was a new idea, very hard to convey what role playing was to somebody who had never even heard of it. Well, like, what is it? Well, we're playing games where we use our imagination and dice and figures for characters, or like, and you can imagine people go, wow, whoa, that's crazy talk, or whatever. And for many years, D&D was very much in that camp, right? It was this rules heavy. The AD&D had all kinds of rules, all kinds of optional rules.
When did third edition come out?
2000.
Okay, so AD&D is the one with the demon on the cover.
Yes.
So that's the one that hit the 80s,
Yeah,
the 1980s, when the satanic panic happened, and everyone was like, don't let your kids do that.
I think those books were published in 1978, 1979. So even though I started playing in 1978, right? I started playing in 1978. My brother and me in Salinas, California, we had no game store. We had a hobby store, and
Salinas is always 10 years behind everybody else.
at least. So we didn't have ability to buy the books, but my brother had access to the little white box booklets, and that's what we played at the time. And then it wasn't until maybe a couple years later, I don't remember, 1980, 1981, I was in junior high when he saw must have been the Mouser manual. It was either at Walden Books or B. Dalton in the mall. They had it. And
Yeah.
my brother bought it because he had a job, I think, at the time.
Yeah.
And then we slowly switched our characters to AD&D because it was a different set of rules, really.
Right.
And then we never stopped playing AD&D. We played that until 2000 when third edition came out. We didn't touch second edition.
So in your experience, you really only played the original AD&D, and then you played third edition. So you never touched second edition, and you didn't even buy fourth edition.
No, I didn't buy fourth edition.
So you skipped editions until fifth edition came out, and someone gave it to you for your birthday.
Right. And I wasn't even touching
And
that.
Saul was like, we're playing Pathfinder. We're not going to get into it.
Yeah,
I'm not going to go back to D&D because I have all of these Pathfinder books.
Yeah, I invested a lot of money, and they're still in the bookcase. We're still in my bookcase, the Pathfinder books, and it's a good 1.5 foot of books.
Yep.
Right. And those books I didn't buy like on eBay or anything. I bought them at the store.
Yeah.
So I paid full price, and so it's quite an investment. And so when somebody gave it to me, it's Mike. Thank you for giving it to me.
I think it was Shannon.
No, it was Mike.
Oh, was it Mike?
Mike, Chris's friend, Mike.
Oh.
Right. Not that. The other Mike. There's like in my life, there's like 7 or 8 Mikes. So
Yes.
you know who you are. So he gave me the book for my birthday, August 12th, and I didn't look at it because we were playing Pathfinder. I'm like, oh, I go, thank you. And I put it on my shelf right over there, my son's bookshelf, for whatever reason. When he was,
I don't know.
I don't know what year it came out. What year the D&D come out? Let me look at my book. So around 2014 or 15, this guy gave me the book in August because it was my birthday. And
It sat on the shelf for 6 months
for about 6 months, right?
until Augustine decided to look at it.
He's like, yeah, what's this? I go, oh, Mike gave it to me for my birthday. He goes, have you looked at it? I go, no. He goes, can I look at it? I go, sure. I go, but we're staying with Pathfinder. He goes, okay. So he's reading the book. He's reading the book. And then he goes, this is really neat system, Dad. I'm like, no. And he goes, no, it's really neat. It's a lot easier, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what he said. I don't remember exactly. And I'm like, no, right? We're not going to. He goes, let's try it. Indeed, when I'm running because I was the GM, when I'm running games, Pathfinder compared to 5th edition, 5th edition is so much easier, right? In a certain sense. And I read the rules, and I'm like, yeah, okay. And then we switched. And
now we have a shelf full of
edition.
Pathfinder and a shelf full of 5th edition.
5th edition, yes.
But I think what 5th edition does is it took all of the ideas that had been floating around since 2000, when 3rd edition, I guess, did 3.5.
They did 3.5, yeah.
When all of these newfangled ideas, right, about how role-playing should be and how it should be simpler for the player to have more chance to actually participate in role-playing instead of looking up stuff and doing, what do you call it? Simulated stuff.
Right.
Less crunchy, more role-playing.
Right. Simpler rules, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Advantage, disadvantage. Instead of in Pathfinder, you got feats and all kinds of things.
Well, you still have feats in D&D, but there's less number crunching, right?
Yeah.
You don't get a plus for this situation, a plus for that. My feat gives me a +3 for this, and things like that.
And those kind of things just kind of slow down stuff. Like if you're trying to run a fast-paced game, because you'll be in the middle of a battle and someone goes, I forgot to add my +3 to my
yes,
to
that
this.
does happen.
And so a good GM or a GM who wants to move things along will say, okay, remember next time. But sometimes they'll go, okay, let's go back and redo it.
Right, yes. So the rules, right? They've definitely changed over the years from a game obviously born out of a war game mentality or roots to a more storytelling type of game. And that has changed who is attracted to it, right? So instead of this number-heavy, crunching, tactical tabletop element, it became more. It could become more of sitting around a table, telling me what you're doing. Okay, I understand. And there is a mechanic for combat, roll your dice, and it does take a while, slow down the game, right? You have, all of a sudden, time is compressed. You are, or actually not compressed, but time is like expanded. So you are role-playing rounds, 6-second increments of time instead of just saying, oh, I'm going to go to the bar or the tavern on the corner. It'll take me an hour to get there or whatever.
Which is one of the most exciting things about playing D&D, right? Or any game. When you've done this, you've gotten somewhere, and all of a sudden your GM says, everybody roll initiative. And there's an excitement that goes around the table like, oh, now I get to use all those cool things that I put into my character, and I get to do these things.
Yeah, totally true. Yeah, and that is Dungeons and Dragons, right? It's mainly a combat heavy game, but because the rules had changed, so you don't really have to run it that way. A lot of people don't run it that way, right? They'll just they'll do the combats and stuff like that, and it's exciting. But a lot of people still now like the role playing aspect, the storytelling aspects, and that's what is really big. That's what really has expanded the people who play D&D, is that it's not just this person who really likes math or likes tactics or likes history. It's somebody who just likes socializing, telling stories with each other, and experiencing things. So in that sense, the rules have changed to make it easier to kind of do both, right? Because now you don't need a calculator to do all these numbers and crunching and stuff. It kind of moved away from that to a more storytelling aspect, which made the audience a lot wider, in my opinion.
You use a term, it lowered the barrier to entry,
Yes. And it did, right? When you look at all these weird rules and the way they try to explain the rules to 5th edition is a much better written set of rule books than any previous edition.
Yes.
Right? Just the way it is. So I think that's important to realize that the rules
have evolved,
right? And 5th edition, people have said it before, and I always like, oh, I don't know about that. And they say, well, 5th edition is the best set of D&D rules that's ever existed. And I'm like, and I hesitantly say yes, because if you're looking at the bar to entry into role-playing games, into fantasy role-playing games, D&D is a much better rule set than original D&D, like I said, than any other set of rules before it.
It also saying that I just would like to point out that there are a lot of people out there who have the idea that they don't particularly like that. They want to go back to the OSR people. They want to go back to the original kind of thing where it's harder and there's more math involved and it's a little bit more grittier. You die easier, that kind of thing, right?
I think it's a play style issue, not necessarily a rule issue.
Right.
But they blame the rules for it because the rules make your character tougher, right? You start off with a very competent character, unlike original D&D where you could get killed with one arrow.
Right.
Boom, you're dead. Oh, no death saves. Nope, you're dead. 0 hit points, you're dead. Right? I mean, that's just all there was to it. AD&D, they try to mitigate that by going, you could, as optional rules, go into negative 10, and then you're totally dead. But somebody has to get to you, and somebody has to render first aid in those 10 rounds. And you can still get damaged.
Right.
So. But D&D, your characters are much tougher when they start off.
In 5th edition.
In 5th edition.
Yeah.
And you're harder to kill.
So that's a playing style, right? Those people that want to have a more grittier, you can die with one arrow kind of game, then they like to go back. They harken back to those original ones, right?
Yeah. The struggling.
Yes.
For and making decisions that make, man, I don't want to get in a fight because I'm gonna die. I don't remember that being a big deal in our games. I don't remember man, we shouldn't get in a fight because we were kids, right? We're like,
we can always roll up another character.
No, I was pretty attached to my character, so I don't know. Maybe I think Felipe was just really lenient on us until he killed my character, and I was totally upset about it. Yeah, so I think it's a play style that they don't like. They don't like the superheroic, I can do anything I want at the beginning. They like that struggle at the beginning to earn your stripes,
right.
Sort of thing, like to earn your place to be a hero. And that's all it is. It's a play style issue. Players, right? Another thing that's changed is players. I know people tell me that there were girls playing when in the 80s. I know for a fact there were because people tell me, I played, women tell me that they played when they were in the 80s, and I'm like, wow, okay. Me, I never saw it, honestly. I didn't see it until 1983.
83?
83, when I went to a convention called Pacificon in the Bay Area, which attracted about 1,000, 1,500 people. And I remember one lady playing, young lady.
Well, I was one of those girls in the 80s playing because my brother wanted...
He was a nerd.
My brother was not a nerd. They needed somebody, so my brother says, you have to come with me. And I literally, that's what happened, is I went and played D&D. I did go and play in some kid's basement. So there you go.
But you were kind of dragged because your brother wanted to play and he needed more players.
Yes.
I think maybe in a certain
and that was the only reason I went.
I think you're right. I think my circumstance was I didn't have sisters near my age. The closest brother was 5 years older than me. And everybody else was out of the house by that time, right? Maybe, more or less. All my older siblings. So that experience didn't happen. And then it was considered a nerdy endeavor, right? It was only nerds play that game. And then because people didn't understand it, right? And it wasn't seen, it was nerdy. It was it's seen as antisocial because sometimes nerds are antisocial. And it had this very negative aspect to it. It wasn't seen as a positive aspect being a nerd back then. So, those kind of people were put in trash cans. That didn't happen to me. I never saw anybody put in a trash can. I don't know. For being such a backward city to live in, I never saw that kind of behavior. But I didn't tell people I played D&D, right? And my friend, my friend Mike, who I also knew in high school,
he still cringes if you tell people he plays D&D.
I don't know. I don't know if he does or not. I don't think he does, but maybe he does. But I remember my friends. We were playing when we were when I was 10. 78, 11. I was 11, and we were still in grammar school. By the time I was in junior high, I was like, no, nobody needs to know. But they tried to start a D&D club in junior high, and I was asked to help them run games, but I was in a different period. Though junior high is strange. But anyway, that didn't happen. But later on, I met Mike through Felipe, through David, and all these people. And we just played with them amongst ourselves. And none of those guys, none of them,
Announced it to the world that they played D&D.
I don't think so. And there was not a girl to be seen. So that was my personal experience. Again, I lived in a very conservative agricultural town. So
Fast forward by, 30 years, and now
40 years even.
D&D has changed. One, all of those gamers have had kids and exposed a lot of kids to that. And two, the internet happened. And
Yes.
so that's how players have found D&D now, is through YouTube and Twitch and different kinds of things.
Right.
Or their parents, and it's changed the perspective of
Right. So back in the very beginning, I remember it was like a college students, right? D&D was this is when I first heard stories about D&D. It's a college student game, mainly white guys played it. And then of course it would shift to, it went down to the high schoolers, which that was me and my friends, and we were, I'm not white, but a lot of white people were playing it. And then the old grognards were like old war gamers.
right.
And they were usually white people who were playing that game. But now, when you look at YouTube, or you look at people streaming, you see everybody playing, right? It's not this homogeneous population.
It's more diverse.
It's much more diverse. And I think a lot of it has to do with the exposure, the internet, right? The internet really changed.
Not just the internet, but YouTube and
That's part of the internet.
No, I know, but specifically people being able to see things versus forums, right?
Right, correct. And what I think happened is people saw people playing, and they're like, oh,
they're not so weird. They're just sitting around talking and being goofy.
And I think that really changed the makeup of who would want to play. I mean, everybody would like, oh yeah, we could do that. And it was fun. And so it made it expose more people to it. And a lot of people say, oh yeah, let me try that game. Looks like fun. So, I don't have to dress in costume and wear ears. I don't have to go to somebody's basement. I mean, literally, people thought that's what everybody did. Even in California, which we don't have basements usually.
Well, sometimes, but
Yeah, we do actually in California, but old houses have basements.
yeah.
I think the players have shifted from that real homogeneous early players to anybody and everybody, which is really neat. And then another thing that has changed is image, right? The image of D&D. Nerdy weirdos playing in basements to being mentioned on really popular TV shows, right? Even
Big Bang Theory. And I think, and then there was that other one, the one with the college, the junior college. What was it called? It was before Big Bang
Community?
Theory. Yes, that was it.
Yes, they had quite a few episodes about D&D and stuff.
Yes.
Yes, and even if it was like making fun of D&D, it exposed people to D&D again, right?
Right.
And not in this satanic panic message, but like, oh, it's funny, it's funny, and then like people were interested in it. And in Big Bang, and then what was that, the scary kid show?
Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. They were playing D&D in it, and it was centered around this theme of D&D. And I think the image of it became different, right? It's like, oh yeah.
It became more pop culture.
Pop culture, correct. And that changed the way people looked at D&D. It wasn't this sinister game from the 80s that caused people to kill themselves and join demonic cults and try to throw evil spells on people. It was just fun, entertaining things that people did to use their imagination. So that negative aspect of being a nerd is not so much a negative aspect. It's like, oh, it's like cool almost. I don't know if it is. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but it's more acceptable. It's not seen as a negative light. That has changed. Interaction, I think the perception of what people did because of the shows, because watching it on YouTube, D&D has gone from being this weird little cultish kind of a game to, oh, people are just together socializing, interacting with each other, using their imagination, and basically telling a story. So I still remember to this day, we were playing at our friend's house, and Mike's house, and his significant other was there, and she would hardly ever pay attention to what we were doing. Right? We invited her to play. No. And then one time, one of her friends came over, and they were like in the kitchen, and we were in the living room, kind of, and we were playing, and then like all of a sudden they were being quiet because they stopped talking, and I'm like, and then we were like, are we being too loud? And he goes, no, I don't know. So we were playing, and then she had like two or three friends over, and then they came out and they started watching us, and they're like, all you guys are just like talking and just telling the story. I'm like, yeah.
They were teachers, by the way.
Yes, they were. They were teachers. And then like, well, that's like they this like the light bulb went off, and this was 10, 15 years ago? Not longer. It was 20 years ago.
Yeah.
21 years ago. And I'm like, yeah, a little bit longer. And it was just strange that they were like, oh. I go, do you want to play? They still didn't want to play because there was still a lot of rules. We were playing 3rd edition at the time, or probably just D&D, AD&D. And it was kind of interesting to, and I still remember that because like the image changed for them, right? Because they had this, obviously they had this idea what they thought it was. And then when they saw us playing, it was like, it blew away that idea that it's not this weird cultish thing. It's just, people getting around the table and telling stories and having fun and interacting with each other, which I think is an interesting part of the dynamic of D&D. Somebody on YouTube was saying that in an age where people are looking at their phones and looking at their tablets and not interacting with each other, D&D still gives you that interaction with other people that I think as humans we still need and crave it if you are just always on your phone kind of thing. I think that's an interesting aspect too.
I agree.
So personally, I think I'll talk about how things have changed for me or how the impact. I think I'm better at critical thinking than I would have been without D&D because D&D puts you in situations that you have to think about, like that would never happen in the real world.
It gives you puzzles to solve or things to figure out with your friends, and then everybody comes up with different ideas and you pick the best one, right? Or you pick one of them. It may not be the best.
Along with that, critical thinking is collaboration, right? Working with people to solve a problem. Now, back in the day when we were kids, every problem was a nail and we were hammers, so we killed everything, right?
That solved the problem.
That solved a lot of problems. But as we grew older, that didn't work as much, and we started actually thinking collectively, like, okay, let's get around this dragon that we don't want to get killed by and do something else. So there was a lot of that critical thinking and collaboration as far as thinking together and coming up with a solution to a problem. Pretty cool. Kind of useful in the world, by the way. Better vocabulary. When I was a kid, my vocabulary was pretty good, and I didn't really notice it because how do you notice your vocabulary is very good unless you take vocabulary tests all the time, which we never did. We just had spelling tests as I was a kid. But like when my son was a little, and he really wanted to play. He learned to read really quickly because he wanted to learn how to read the player's not the player's handbook.
It was
Pathfinder.
Pathfinder, yeah.
Right, the
Player's
rules.
Handbook, yeah.
And I remember when he was about, five or six. I mean, he might have been younger.
No, he was about 5 or 6.
And one of our friends came over, and who's a teacher, and was listening to him talk, and he goes, he has a really good vocabulary. I go, what? What do you mean? Because it was just normal for me, right? The way he spoke, or the words he used. I go, oh, it's because he listens to us when we're playing games, and he's starting to read. He's starting to read, and I told him he needed to, be able to read the Pathfinder book, and that thing is huge. And so he was learning to say words and stuff, and learning to read words that normal kids wouldn't enter their vocabulary, right? Proficiency,
Yeah.
right? That when would a second grader ever know about proficiency? All kinds of words. Scimitar, right? What the hell is a scimitar? How's that different from a long sword? Well,
They have pictures.
they have pictures and armor, right? And if you look at spells, you gotta look at the wording of the spells. And
There's nothing like him and Alan when they're 7 or 8 sitting with the Pathfinder book between them, reading things to each other.
and figuring out what it meant,
Yeah.
right? And I thought that was really neat. And you don't realize it when you're growing up that it has that big of an impact on your vocabulary.
Well, not only that, if you play with your kids or kids play, it does help them in all of the social situations,
Right.
figuring things
Yes.
out, learning how to work with other people,
Knowing your turn.
yeah, knowing when it's your turn, all kinds of different
All
things.
kinds of stuff, yeah. And when I ran games for kids at cons and at the game store, it was like it wasn't like herding cats. They were very responsive to how you wanted the table to be run. There was not a lot of talking over each other. Heck, adults are worse than the kids that I used to run for. And every game that I ran at the kids table, whether it be at the con or at the game store, it was really a pleasant experience. And I think they learned quite a bit, and I learned that kids can really play D&D and play role-playing games. And at a very young age, I'm talking kids that were like as young as 5 to about teenage years. So vocabulary, very interesting. 3, better dealing with situations that occur, right? That you're not used to. I think quit better thinking on your feet kind of thing, right? That kind of evolved from playing role-playing games where you're like, all of a sudden, your GM springs something on you, and you're like, oh, you don't know what's going on, or you don't expect it, and you're thrown for a loop, and then you have to figure out how to think. So I think that kind of helps you out in the real world, right?
Well, yeah.
Quicker thinking about things critically, all that is helpful in dealing with the world that we live in. And then, of course, there's the life relationships I've made. My brother, I'm very close to my brother Felipe. I mean, I'm close to all my brothers, but Felipe, because we play games all the time, we used to, and
You still do.
and now we still do. I mean, that tells you. I mean, I probably see my brother online, of course, more than I see any other sibling, even siblings that live in my own town. So, and he lives in Portland, and that's because we play games together, and that keeps us in communication and talking to each other and stuff like that. Same thing with my friend Mike and Sip and everybody that I used to play when I was in second grade.
No.
When I was in fifth grade or whatever. When I was 11. When I was 11, I played role-playing games, and some of those guys I still know today and still play games today. Mike, I didn't meet till I was in probably in junior high, and he's still my friend, and we still talk, and I just visited him in Portland this last summer. So lifelong relationships and positive relationships that we have because of a simple game called Dungeons and Dragons. And I think, a lot of people would always say that it was like an antisocial game, or it was for people who were antisocial. And I'm like, and it just never occurred to me that to be that way.
Well, I think that, so it's been around for 50 years this year.
Yeah.
And you've listed a whole bunch of things that have evolved and changed in that time.
Yeah.
And also the aspect of it being a very social game is very true. And I think the other thing is that it started, there were other games besides Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, yeah.
But it kind of brings in people. And I was hearing someone talk about how it's like the first game that people play, but it's not always the first game that people play, because like if your dad was playing Champions and that's probably the first game you played, or if Dungeons and Dragons may not have been the first game that people played, because White Wolf, what is it? Not White Wolf.
Yeah, White Wolf.
The vampire. And all of those.
In the 90s, that
it's
was a
the
big deal.
genres that
Right.
people like that might bring them in
Right.
to playing role-playing games. But D&D is one of the oldest ones, right?
Yes.
And it has evolved and changed and grown the hobby.
Oh, definitely. There's people argue, well, somebody would have made a role-playing game sooner or later. Yeah, maybe. How long would that have been? People were thinking about similar things, but it just didn't happen, right? And D&D was the first, and D&D was popular. It became like phenomenon. Phenomena. It became really popular in the 80s, and there was a little bit of backlash because of the sinister looking books and stuff like that, and it kind of like dipped a little bit. And the third edition came out. I think it brought a lot of people in again, people were playing it. It brought me into, because like I said, I skipped second edition. It brought me back into role playing, and I've been role playing. I never stopped role playing, but I was playing other games.
Right.
I was playing Space Opera. I was playing Dark Conspiracy, and you're right. D&D was my first game, but a lot of people, their first game is like you said,
Traveler or Champions.
Traveler, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a first game for a lot of kids in the 90s.
That's a hard one.
In the 90s, because the Turtles were
Right,
really popular. And it was not seen as this like sinister game by
Right.
parents, right? Or Star Trek was the first one. Or you could play Star Trek, but you can't
Star
play
Wars.
Yeah, you can play Star Wars, but not D&D, because D&D is satanic, which was a big deal in the 80s in some parts of the country, in the United States. Not to me, but other places, I guess. So things have changed in that sense, and I think D&D was. I mean, when people say, "Oh yeah, D&D is the biggest RPG," but there's a lot of RPGs out there who have also been the first ones to bring players in.
Right.
And I think D&D is just like it's like the entry to role playing games usually, but not all the time, because some people are not interested in the fantasy element. They're interested by science fiction. They're interested in
Superheroes
or Cthulhu myths, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So even though we talk about D&D not exclusively, but we talk about D&D's anniversary, D&D has definitely impacted role playing industry.
Yes.
And continues to do so.
Yes.
To this day. So happy birthday, D&D, and I'm sure people will keep playing it for a long time.
There you go. This is Gaming Perspectives with
Saul
and Jolene.
And you have a good day.